Hello everyone, welcome back to theCUBE's live coverage here in San Francisco, California for AWS Summit 2022. I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE. 2 days of coverage. AWS Summit 2022 in New York City's coming up this summer. We'll be there as well. Events are back. theCUBE is back, of course, with theCUBE Virtual, theCUBE Hybrid, theCUBE.net. Check it out, a lot of content. This year, more than ever, a lot more cloud data, cloud native, modern applications, all happening. Got a great guest here, Jeremey Burton, CUBE alumni, CEO of Observe Inc. In the middle of all the cloud scale, big data, observability. Jeremey, great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Always great to come and talk to you on theCUBE, and it's been a few years. So.
Well, you got your hands, you're in the trenches with a great startup, good funding, great board, great people involved in the observability space, hot area. But also, you've been a senior executive, president of Dell, EMC. 11 years ago, you had a vision, and you actually had an event called Cloud Meets Big Data.
Yeah.
And it's here. You predicted it 11 years ago. Look around. It's cloud meets big data.
Yeah, I mean the cloud thing, I think, was probably already a thing, but the big data thing, I do claim credit for sort of catching that bus early. We were on the bus early, and I think it was only inevitable, if you could bring the economics and the compute of cloud to big data, you could find out things you could never possibly imagine.
So you're close to a lot of companies that we've been covering deeply. Snowflake, obviously, you're involved at the board level. You know the founders, you know the people there. Cloud, you know Amazon, you know what's going on here.
Yeah.
You're doing a startup as the CEO at the helm, chief of Observe Inc., which is an observability, which is, to me, in the center of this confluence of data, engineering, large scale integrations, data as code, integrating into applications. I mean, it's a whole nother world developing, like you see with Snowflake. I mean, Snowflake's a super cloud, as we call it. So a whole nother wave is here. What's this wave we're on? How would you describe the wave?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, people are, I think, writing more software than ever before. Why? Because they've realized that if you don't take your business online and offer a service, then you become largely irrelevant. And so you've got a whole set of new applications. I think more applications now than any point, not just ever, but the mid-90s I always looked at as the golden age of application development. Now back then people were building for Windows. Well now they're building for things like, AWS is now the platform. So you've got all of that going on, and then at the same time, the side effect of these applications is they generate data, and lots of data. And the sort of the transactions, what you bought today or something like that, but then there's what we do, which is all the telemetry data, all the exhaust fumes. And I think people really are realizing that their differentiation is not so much their application, it's their understanding of the data. Can I understand who my best customers are, what I sold today? If people came to my website and didn't buy, then why not? Where did they drop off? All of that they want to analyze, and the answers are all in the data. The question is, can you understand it?
In our last startup showcase, we featured data as code. One of the insights that we got out of that, and I want to get your opinion on, or a reaction to, is that data used to be put into a data lake and turns into a data swamp, or throw it into the data warehouse and then we'll do some queries, maybe a report once in a while. And so data, once it was done, unless it was real time, even real time was not good anymore after real time. That was the old way. Now you're seeing more and more effort to say, let's go look at the data. Because now machine learning is getting better, not just train once. They're iterating.
Yeah.
This notion of iterating and then pivoting, iterating and pivoting. Yeah. That's a Silicon Valley story. That's like how startups work. But now you're seeing data being treated the same way. So now you have this data concept that's now part of a new way to create more value for the apps. So this whole new cycle of data being reused and repurposed and figured out. And
I'm a big fan of, years ago, just an amazing guy, Andy McAfee at the MIT CSAIL labs I spent time with, and he had this line which still sticks to me this day, which is, look, he said, I'm part of a body which believes that everything is a matter of data. Like if you have enough data, you can answer any question, and this is going back 10 years when he was saying these kind of things, and certainly research is on the forefront, but I think you're now starting to see that mindset of the sort of MIT research be mainstream in enterprises. They're realizing that, it is about the data. If I can better understand my data, better than my competitor, then I've got an advantage. And so the question is how, what technologies and what skills do I need in my organization to allow me to do that?
So let's talk about observing. You're the CEO of, okay, given you've seen the waves before, you're in the front lines of observability, which again is in the center of all this action. What's going on with the company? Give a quick minute to explain, observe for the folks who don't know what you guys do. What's the company doing? What's the funding status? What's the product status and what's the customer status?
Yeah, so we realized a handful of years ago, well, let's say 5 years ago, that look, the way people are building applications is different. They're way more functional, they change every day, but in some respects they're a lot more complicated, they're distributed, microservices architectures. And when something goes wrong, the old way of troubleshooting and solving problems was not going to fly, because you had so much change going into production on a daily basis, it was hard to tell where the problem was. And so we thought, okay, it's about time somebody looks at the exhaust fumes from this application and all the telemetry data and helps people troubleshoot and make sense of the problems that they're seeing. So, I mean, that's observability. It's actually a term that goes back to the 1960s. It was a guy called Rudolph, like everything in tech, it's a reinvention of something from years gone by. But there's a guy called Rudy Coleman in 1960s coined the term, and the term was been able to determine the state of a system by looking at its external outputs. Yeah. And so we've been going on this for the best part of 4 years now. It took us 3 years just to build the product. Yeah. I think what people don't appreciate these days often is the barrier to entry on a lot of these markets is quite high. You need a lot of functionality to have something that's credible with a customer. So yeah, this last year we did our first year selling. We've got about 40 customers now. We've got great investors, Sutter Hill Ventures. Mike Spicer, who was, the guy who was really the first guy in at Snowflake and the initial investor. Yeah. We're fortunate enough to have Mike on our board. And part of the Observe story is closely knit with Snowflake because all of that telemetry data, we store in there.
So I want to get, pivot to that, Mike Spicer, Snowflake, Jeremey Burton, theCUBE, kind of same thinking. This idea of a super cloud, or what Snowflake became, Snowflake is massively successful on top of AWS. Mm-hmm. And now you're seeing startups and companies build on top of Snowflake. Yeah. So that's become an entrepreneurial story that we think that to go big in the cloud, you can have a cloud on a cloud. As Jerry Chen and Greylock calls it, castles in the cloud, where there are moats in the cloud. So you're close to it. I know you're doing some stuff with Snowflake. So as a startup, what's your view on building on top of, say, a Snowflake or an AWS? Because again, you got to go where the data is. You need all the data.
Yeah, so
what's your take on that?
I mean, having enough gray hair now, again in tech, I think if you want to predict the future, look at the past. And 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I was at a small company called Oracle. And Oracle was the database company, and their ambition was to manage all of the world's transactional data. And they built on a platform, or a couple of platforms, one Windows, and the other main one was Solaris. And so at that time, the operating system was the platform, and then that was the ecosystem that you would compete on top of. And then there were companies like SAP that built applications on top of Oracle. So then wind the clock forward 25 years, gray hairs. The platform isn't the operating system anymore. The platform is AWS, Google Cloud. I got to probably look around if I say that.
It's okay. But hyperscale, CapEx built out.
That is the new platform. And then Snowflake comes along. Well, their aspiration is to manage all of the, not just human-generated data, but machine-generated data in the world of cloud. And I think that they've done an amazing job doing for I'd say the big data world, what Oracle did for the relational data world, way back 25 years ago. And then there are folks like us come along, and of course my ambition would be, look, if we can be as successful as an SAP building on top of Snowflake, as they were on top of Oracle, then we'd probably be quite happy.
So you're building on top of Snowflake?
We're building on top of Snowflake, 100%, and I've had folks say to me, well, aren't you worried about that? Isn't that a risk? It's like, well, that's a risk.
Are you still on the board?
Yeah, I'm still on the board, yeah. That's a risk I'm prepared to take. I am long on Snowflake.
It sounds, well, you're in a good spot. Stay on the board, then you'll know what's going on. Okay, in all seriousness, but this is a real dynamic.
It is.
It's not a one-off.
Well, and I do believe as well that the platform that you see now with AWS, if you look at the revenues of AWS, it's an order of magnitude more than Microsoft was 25 years ago with Windows. And so I believe the opportunity for folks like Snowflake and folks like Observe, it's an order of magnitude more than it was for the Oracle and the SAPs of the old world.
Yeah, and I think this is really, I think this is something that this next generation of entrepreneurship is, the go big scenario is, you got to be on a platform.
Yeah, it's quite easy
or be the platform, but it's hard. There's only like, how many seats are at that table left?
Well, value migrates up over time. So, you know, when the cloud thing got going, there were probably 10, 20, 30, rack space, and there's 1,000,001 infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. My old employer at EMC, we had Pivotal. Pivotal was a platform as a service. You don't hear so much about it these days. But initially there's a lot of players and then it consolidates. And then to like extract a real business, you got to move up, you got to add value, you got to build databases, then you got to build applications. So
it's interesting, moving from the data center to the cloud was a dream for startups, so they didn't have to provision the CapEx. Now the CapEx is in the cloud, then you build on top of that, you got Snowflake, now you got on top of that.
The assumption is almost that compute and storage is free. I know it's not quite free.
Yeah, it's almost free.
But you can, as an application vendor, you think, well, what can I do if I assume compute and storage is free? That's the mindset you've got to get into.
And I think the platform enablement to value, so if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm going to get a serious multiple of value on what I'm paying. Most people don't even blink at their AWS bills unless they're like massively huge. Then it's a repatriation question or whatever, discount question, but for most startups or any growing company, the Amazon bill should be a small factor.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me, look, you're building on Snowflake. You're going to be paying them money. How does that work with your business model? If you're paying them money, do you have a viable business? And it's like, well, okay, we could build a database as well in Observe, but then I've got half the development team working on something that will never be as good as Snowflake. And so we made the call early on that, we want to innovate above the database, right? Snowflake are doing a great job of innovating on the database, and the same is true of something like Amazon. Like Snowflake could have built their own cloud and their own platform, but they didn't. Yeah,
and what's interesting is that Dave Vellante and I have been pointing this out, and he's obviously more on Snowflake. I've been looking at Databricks, and the same dynamics happening. The proof is the ecosystem. I mean, if you look at Snowflake's ecosystem right now, and Databricks, it's exploding.
Right.
I mean, the shows are selling out, the floor space is booked. That's the old days at VMware, the old days at AWS.
Well, and for Snowflake and any platform provider, it's a beautiful thing because we build on Snowflake and we pay them money. They don't have to sell to us, right? And we do a lot of the support, and so the economics work out really, really well if you're a platform provider and you've got a lot of ecosystem.
Yeah, and also you get a trajectory of economies of scale with the institutional knowledge of Snowflake, integrations, new products, you're scaling a step function with them.
Yeah, I mean, we manage 10 petabytes of data right now. Right, when I arrived at EMC in 2010, we had 1 petabyte customer. And so at Observe, we've been only selling the product for a year. We have 10 petabytes of data under management. And so being able to rely on a platform that can manage that is invaluable.
Well, Jeremy, great conversation. Thanks for sharing your insights on the industry. We got a couple minutes left. Put a plug in for Observe. What do you guys know? You got some good funding, great partners. I don't know if you can talk about your POC customers, but you got a lot of high-end folks that are working with you. You're getting traction.
It's
Scale's around the corner, sounds like. Is that where you are at?
We've got a big announcement coming up in 2 or 3 weeks. We've got new funding, which is always great. The product is really, really close. I think as a startup, you always strive for market fit, which is at which point can you just start hiring salespeople and the revenue keeps going. We're getting pretty close to that right now. We've got about 40 SaaS companies that run on the platform. They're almost all AWS Kubernetes, which is our sweet spot to begin with. But we're starting to get some really interesting enterprise type customers. We're F5 networks. We're POCing right now with Capital One. We've got some interesting news around Capital One coming up. I can't share too much, but it's going to be exciting. And like I said, Sutter Hill continue to stick by us.
I think Capital One's a big Snowflake customer as well, right?
They were early in, one of the things that attracted me to Capital One was they were very, very good with Snowflake early on, and they put Snowflake in a position in the bank where they thought that Snowflake could be successful. And today, that is one of Snowflake's biggest accounts. So.
Capital One, very innovative cloud, obviously AWS customer, and very innovative, certainly in the CISO and CIO. on another point on where you're at, so you're pre-scale, meaning you're about to scale.
Right.
So you got POCs. What's that trajectory look like? Can you see around the corner? What's going on? What's around the corner that you're going to hit the straight and narrow and gas it fast?
Yeah, I mean the key thing for us is we got to get the product right. The nice thing about having a guy like Mike Spicer on the board is he doesn't obsess about revenue at this stage. His questions at the board are always about like, is the product right? Is the product right? Is the product right? Have you got the product right? And because we know when the product's right, we can then scale the sales team and the revenue will take care of itself.
Yeah.
So right now, all the attention is on the product. This year, the exciting thing is we're adding all the tracing visualizations, so people will be able to, the kind of things that back in the day you could do with the New Relics and AppDynamics, the last generation of APM tools, you're going to be able to do that within Observe. And we've already got the logs and the metrics capability in there. So for us, this year's a big one because we sort of complete the trifecta, the
What's
logs.
the secret sauce of Observe? If you had to put it into a sentence, what's the secret sauce?
I think an amazing founding engineering team, number one. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to build an amazing product and you have to solve a problem in a different way. And we've got great long-term investors. And the biggest thing our investors give us, actually it's not just money, it gives us time to get the product right, because if we get the product right, then we can get the growth.
Got it. Final question, while I got you here, you've been on the enterprise business for a long time. What's the buyer landscape out there? You got people doing POCs on Capital One scale, so we know that goes on. What's the appetite at the buyer side for startups, and what are the requirements that you're seeing? Obviously we're seeing people go in and dip into the startup pool because new ways to refactor their business, restructure, so a lot of happening in cloud. What's the criteria? How are enterprises engaging in with startups? Yeah,
I mean, enterprises, they know they've got to spend money transforming the business. I mean, this was, I almost feel like my old Dell or EMC self there, but what we were saying 5 years ago is happening. Everybody needs to figure out a way to take their business to this digital world. Everybody has to do it. So the nice thing from a startup standpoint is they know at times they need to risk or take a bet on new technology in order to help them do that. So I think you've got buyers that A, have money, B, are prepared to take risks, and it's a race against time to get their offerings in this sort of new digital footprint.
Final question, what's the state of AWS? Where do you see them going next? Obviously they're continuing to be successful. How does cloud 3.0, or they always say it's day one, but it's maybe more like day 10. But what's next for AWS? Where do they go from here? Obviously they're doing well, they're getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I mean, we're on AWS as well. And so I think if they keep nurturing the builders and the ecosystem, then that is their superpower. They have an early lead, and if you look at where maybe the likes of Microsoft lost the plot in the late 90s, it was they stopped really caring about developers and the folks who are building on top of their ecosystem. In fact, they started buying up their ecosystem and competing with people in their ecosystem. And I see with AWS that they have an amazing head start, and if they did more, if they do more than that, that's what's going to keep this juggernaut rolling for many years to come.
Yeah, they got the silicon, they got the stack developing. Jeremey Burton, inside theCUBE, great resource for commentary, but also founding with the CEO of a company called Observe Inc., in the middle of all the action on the board of Snowflake as well. Great startup, thanks for coming on theCUBE.
Always a pleasure. Okay,
live from San Francisco, this is theCUBE. I'm John Furrier, your host. Stay with us. More coverage from San Francisco, California after the short break.